that's a it's like an interesting way to start us off. Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, guys, if you guys if you have any questions, please feel free to ask anything. If you want to type it out, that's fine. If you want to raise your hand, and I'll put you up on stage here. Do that. Whatever. Let's get some stuff going. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone ask? Feel free to raise your hand or type it in. I don't know, one of the chats, maybe debate chat. Want to do that? I don't know. One or the other. Hmm. No questions. All right. Well, how about this? I'll raise a just. Oh, event chat. There we go. Have I read Charles Mills' The Racial Contract? Let me unmute this particular channel. Uh, no, I've never heard of that book before or the author, or maybe I have and I just don't remember. Charles Mills. Charles W. Mills. Oh, and he's Jamaican too. Ooh. Oh, I'm sad that I haven't read this. That I haven't looked at this now. Um, yeah, verbal. This in case you're unaware, I actually am West Indian, and so I always love reading anything West Indian literature of any sort, especially when it's political or philosophical. So I'm trying to get my way through Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth right now. I need to pick it up again and continue reading it at some point. Juan Anthony Apia's. Okay, I'll keep this in mind. I'll look these guys up. Thanks for the recommendation. All right. Do you acknowledge the abolition of slavery in 1780 in Pennsylvania, or do you consider the abolition to have happened in 1865 with 13th Amendment? First off, yeah. So I mean, individual states, I'm sure, have abolished slavery at at the state level. Uh, that happened as time went on, as new states were founded. That's why Kansas was a free state, Missouri wasn't. Uh, but as for countrywide abolition, that happened with the 13th Amendment in 1865. And it's one thing to say, well, do you consider abolition to have happened in 1780 because Pennsylvania did it? Well, that's the thing, right? As long as there are black people in the country and slavery at the same time, and even if it's only in one state, black people could be kidnapped from that state, taken over to the slave state, and be forced into slavery. That's a very common phenomenon. I mean, the most famous example of it is Solomon Northup. The was it 13 years a slave or 12 years a slave? I mean, it happened. You can't have abolition without complete abolition, in my opinion. What's my favorite historical event in relevance to African American history? From Stone. That's a tough one. Hmm. Uh, there's a lot. Um, I mean, I could talk about the 1865, the 13th, is it 13th Massachusetts, the first all black regiment in the Civil War. Their big charging of a Confederate fort. Was it not 13th Massachusetts? Was it something else? 54th Massachusetts. My bad. Yeah, 50 as the 54th Massachusetts. They're charging of Fort Wagner in 1863. They were the leading frontal assault regiment, and it was because of their charge that the Union was actually able to take that fort, I believe. Other events, might be like Black Panthers storming the California, state legislative house. The Maybe the death of Fred Hampton was a pivotal moment. Trial of Angela Davis, stuff like that. I'd say. Yeah, I'd say those are among my favorite moments of African American history. What do you think existing forms of reparations have been helpful or are more needed? When you say reparations, I'm assuming that you're referring to forms of like the current welfare state. Uh, I think it's more is needed, not because you know there hasn't been enough. It's because what's been given has been completely sabotaged. Uh, since its implementation. And it's this attitude that has always kind of existed in USA in regards to helping the uh, to- essentially reversing redlining. Yeah, that's the thing is that we've had this attitude in the USA when it comes to helping helping African Americans who were previously just discriminated, who were coming out of a world of massive discrimination. Uh, in fact, we have taught them labor Chicago Tribune, I think it was. I'm trying to find this particular quote from I think it was the Chicago Tribune. Uh, Damn it. Let me give me just 1 second. I can find this real quick. Uh, case- yeah, yeah, it was the Chicago Tribune. Yeah, so here's the thing with the Chicago Tribune in response to I believe it was uh when yeah I think it was they were trying to set up a pension specifically for the previously enslaved African Americans. This is 1891. The Chicago Tribune put out an editorialization saying they've been taught to labor, they've been taught Christian civilization, and to speak the noble English language instead of some African gibberish. The account is square with the ex-slaves. That's in 1891. That account wasn't fucking square. You gave them freedom and then told them to go fuck off. You you got through some portion of Reconstruction and then cut it off halfway through. Uh, like Dr. King talked about this, saying, well, give them, there are some people who say, well, give them their rights and their freedoms. We're all for that, but then you ask for compensatory or preferential effects of some sort, and then they recoil in horror. And then he said he gave an analogy of saying, well, you have a race and someone has a 400-year starting line. The other runner is going to have to perform some amazing feat in order to catch up. So, in terms of current forms of reparations for the welfare state, for investments that have been made, these things have been attacked since their inception on local level, state level, and later on throughout the federal level. Especially when you get people like Reagan and Bush, Clinton, Bush Jr. It's just, yeah, it's a mess. Good father. A person can't say that slavery was legal in the U.S. when half the states had already made it illegal. I mean, why? Doesn't make any sense because I can just flip that the other way around. I can say, well, slavery can be illegal because half the states had made it legal. And again, doesn't matter if it's illegal in. The thing is, though, the EU is a federalized organization that is comprised of different nations. The USA is one country, is a single nation that has various states. So it's much more like comparing the individual states. It's a republic. The states, yeah, you could say the states are kind of like countries that they have some individuality to them, but I mean, the states in Germany do as well. The states uh in what is it? The in Australia, or provinces, whatever they're called, in Australia, are have individuality as well. Hell, back home we don't have states. On my three islands that I lived on, but we have districts. They have some form of individuality as well. But that's just because that's just how modern day governments work, to in order to take away all the workload from the centralized government and push it outward towards individual regions, maybe to give them some more autonomy. But yeah, yeah. Again, if your point is that someone can't say that slavery is legal in USA because half the states made it illegal, it doesn't matter if half states made it illegal, because as long as there are states that had it legal, you could still have you could still enslave state African Americans in where uh states where slavery was legal, because all you need to do is kidnap them, take them to a state where slavery is legal. And again, this was common. It happened. Uh, yes. Okay. And that's taking a person from a completely different country. This is the same country. These states have to abide by that nation's federal laws. There was no federal abolition of slavery. Like if I told you that weed was illegal in the USA, I would be right for the most part because federal outlawing of weed is still a thing. What do you think about the 750 global slaves today residing around Africa, and what responsibility does America have to those slaves? America has whatever responsibility. Is not a country; it's a union, federation, republic, whatever. Uh, the concept of a state, of a nation state, is not separate from it being a union, federation, or republic. Those aren't separate things. They're not mutually exclusive. Anyway, PZH asks, what do you think about the 750 global slaves today residing around Africa, and what responsibility does America have to those slaves? America has a responsibility to have to those slaves whatever damage they might have caused to bring those events, to bring those conditions about, as do other countries. So I mean, if you had like if you know you're asking me, well, about like for example, like let's say Burkina Faso. If you ask me about Burkina Faso and we're pointing to like the shitty conditions of that nation, is it? And you ask me, who's to blame for there? I'd say France because France supported countries made the situation come about. Yeah, because countries did support various conditions or or conspired in various events to create uh to create situations and conditions that would be beneficial to them at the expense of that home country. We see this throughout the 20th century. The USA the USA conspired to topple governments in South America, uh, Iran in 1953, wasn't it? Alongside England, I believe, in that particular instance. France had a whole ass hand in Africa in regards to its previous colonies. Burkina Faso was one of them, actually. That's why I was gonna go into that example. I'm saying that nations like the United States have created these conditions that have allowed things like slavery to still exist in these countries because they intervened because they didn't like that they were like nationalizing industries that were providing resources to them in some way. So America might have some responsibility. I'm not sure because I don't really know about too much about modern African slavery. Should we buy from China to support the situation of Uyghur slaves? No. When buying from China and supporting Uyghur slaves is different things. If it's buying products that are directly made by them, yeah, definitely not. I don't know. That's a situation I don't know too much about either. So like I said, this is an African American history and Q&A, a discussion and Q&A. That's the principle. I mean, if it's products that are directly made, supporting countries that have slaves equals we support slavery. Supporting countries that have slaves equals we support slavery. I don't necessarily think that, but I could understand that. I could understand that logic at the same time. It's rough because we can't just not buy from China, unfortunately, because we unfortunately decided to load off all of our fucking industrialization and production of like everything to China for whatever fucking reason. I don't know why. Oh wait, I know why actually, because they have cheap fucking labor and they don't pay their people anything. We can bring it back with extra automation. We do all the time. I think we could bring it back without doing automation. I think we can USA can produce its own fucking cars and its own iPhones and shit. The issue is that private companies don't want to pay their workers to do that because again, it's cheaper to just offload it to China where they don't pay anything or to pay fuck all. Because regulations in the states too. Yeah, maybe, but that's I regulations are something they just kind of have to deal with as a company that exists in the USA, regardless. Apple and all of them have to deal with regulations already. And at some point, they would just get to a point where they become efficient enough to get around those regulations. USA had the highest wages in the world in the 1950s. I mean, I could believe that, and they were a large manufacturer. Yeah, again, I can believe that. That wouldn't surprise me. Like Detroit car was like the car manufacturer of the world at some point, and then the the automobile market crashed or some shit because our I think well the no, market as a holding crashed, but Detroit's automobile market crashed because labor is being exported. Well, I mean, it was though. Like that's what the if I remember correctly, that's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership was about. That's what the as when China and USA started trading on a major scale, China was starting to. This is under like Deng when he started to open up when he started to sort of privatize China's economy and reverse from sort of Mao's idea of a Marxist society to a more capitalist society that has formed into modern day China. At what point do you think black communities say we got it, we can take it from here, no further reparations are needed? When the black versus white wage gap closes or is near closing. Referring back towards the end of the Civil War, we had this idea that we would be caretakers of a previously enslaved, but allow them to be independent until they could uh, be self-sufficient. If you ever, PTH, have you ever heard of something called Special Field Orders number 15? Okay, so this was a an order issued by General Sherman, the guy who burnt down all of fucking Georgia. Yeah, the devil came down to Georgia, and his name was General Sherman. If you want to read it, it's right here from University of Maryland, I think, UND. Yeah. Now, essentially, what this was, General Sherman put this order out, and upon it, land in the South from Georgia through along the coast from Georgia to Florida was confiscated from previous slave owning hands. From there, that land was given to the previously enslaved. About like 40 is about like 40,000, it was a couple thousand families or something like that. So yeah, sorry, it settled approximately 18,000 formerly enslaved families and other black people then living in the area. Yeah, so it's along the Atlantic coast of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. If you read the Wikipedia article, the point was for these people to be able to have land. Oh, sorry, I just got an email. The point was for these people to be able to have land, to work it for themselves, and to be able to be self-sufficient. From there, but up until that point, the union would provide protection until protection and security, and otherwise just general resources until they could get to that point. Unfortunately, that order was reversed at the when President Lincoln was assassinated because the president after him, his vice president Andrew Johnson, decided to reverse that order, gave the land back to the previous slaveholders instead. So I think what is really needed is in the for African Americans to get to that point of we got it, we can take it from here. No reparations needed afterwards is, for one thing, that wealth gap. Sorry, I said wage gap prior before. I meant wealth gap. That wealth gap needs to be closed, and on a more like sort of social or societal, maybe even philosophical level, the abolition of race as well. That's a whole different topic there. If you want to go into that, can do. Move on to a good father question. What do you think about the idea of modern day reparations? Depends what you mean by reparations. So I mean, this is a topic that I've looked up for, and I do support money. Yeah, money. Yeah, there we go. I don't support monetary payments, and if you actually look it uh, up on the basis of people who study this topic, like serious scholars and academics, journalists, so on, no one takes the idea of like cash payment handout reparations seriously. It's just not something that people would get behind. I don't even think the African American community in the USA would would support it. If I remember correctly, I might be wrong in that instance. Don't quote me there, but yeah, no one takes like these cash that the idea of cash payment handouts for reparations as a thing. If you read articles like Ta-Nehisi Coates' "The Case for Reparations," I mean, you'll see that he might talk about it, but that's not what that essay is about whatsoever. What else? Who we still all have in here? We got Rat Eye and Zero. Zero, you guys have been quiet, man. Gotta speak up. If you got a question or something you want to ask, even if it's something like that's strange and you know, or some shit that's not even like necessarily like political like sort of questions been going through. Feel feel free to ask it. Like fucking Godfather just came in here and was like, yeah, why do black people like fried chicken so much? It's weird, but you know what? Fuck it. Go ahead. Ask weird questions. I don't care. For the next two generations, the U.S. Only has governments that do not outright support the black community, but do support individualism. What do you think the black community should do to improve their own situation? I'm Canadian, so uh, Canadian culture and American culture are pretty analogous to each other, man. I mean, I'm sure you still have something you can ask, man. I can't tell you what international scholars say, Goodfather. I can tell you what American scholars have said on the core on the topic of of African American reparations. They do not. They're oh the KFC. Fucking god damn it, fucking idiot. Oh fuck's sake. Anyway, sorry, please. I'll skip it to your question for a second. Okay, so next to generations, the U.S. only has governments that support um individualism rather than the black community as a whole. What do you think the black community should do to improve their own situation? Oof, that's a tough question. I mean, what you see is an effect of what one could call generational poverty, and with this, you have because like again the effect of being wealthy is that that wealth is passed down. I can't remember what the statistic is. It's like 70% of wealth that people accumulate is generally inherited or something like that. It's a ridiculous amount. Yeah, yeah. Well, again, wealth is inherited, but that's the thing, right? The black community is has very rarely had wealth itself. There have been particular instances of certain individuals, and very rarely certain communities. Community wealth is big, but that has existed on in the black community at a very small scale, and even then, when it did exist, you had shit like Tulsa happen, where that wealth just went up in flames, literally. So I mean, you want to. So I mean, if you want to ask, what do you think black community should do to improve their own situation? In that instance, when you want, when you have a government that is not really willing to give outright support to the black community as a whole, then I think you're gonna end up with the next Stokely Carmichael, or otherwise known as Kwame Ture. You're gonna have another Black Power. You're gonna have another Black Power movement, and you're gonna have the things that the Black Power movement advocated for, which were self sufficiency in within those communities. And keep in mind, it's because of Kwame Ture and his work in Lowndes County, which is in Mississippi, I believe, or give me 1 second. Sorry, is like Lowndes County, Alabama. Michael Stokely Carmichael, while he was still working as leadership in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was the organization that John Lewis, the late congressman, was a part of when he was like, he's going across the uh, that bridge in Alabama with Dr. King and all that. He led. He was kind of sick of Dr. King's organization. Dr. King and his organization just taking too long to do the work, and then when they did do some work, they just kind of left, and then it was them by themselves again. So what he said, we're gonna take uh our operation to this county away from Dr. King because Dr. King's gonna focus on all the big things. He's not gonna focus on the smaller places that are facing really awful conditions. So he took SNCC, the SNCC, to Lowndes County and started a grassroots movement on the local level in Lowndes County. He got a large portion of the black population there to register to vote. And from there he formed a political party called the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, or the LSC FO, or the LCFO. And I want you to tell me, what does that symbol at the bottom look like? The Lowndes County Freedom Organization. That was their symbol that they used. It's a panther, a black panther. They were the original Black Panther Party before the Black Panther Party existed. And the Black Panther Party was advocating for the exact same stuff as this, and they built. Yeah, it's this is fantastic shit, isn't it? When I read about all this earlier this semester, man, I was like, I was freaking out. I was like, this is amazing. But yeah, sorry. But these activities in Lowndes County led to black people getting elected into local offices, sheriffs, uh, postmasters of that county, and council members and shit. They gain political power. So when you give people political power, you can give people economic power, and you can give them social power. So I mean, honestly, you cannot have this thing of a government that doesn't support black people, because without that, you don't have that ability to do so. I highly disagree. It makes it significantly easier. I have to disagree there, because political power does make it significantly easier to go over the hurdles that would prevent economic power. And if you want a great example of that, I'd recommend looking at Wilmington, North Carolina, I believe, and the events that happened in Wilmington after the only coup d'état that happened in the United States soil. Anyway, uh, yeah, Rada, go. I mean, ask a question. If you got a question, ask it. If it- we open this fucking we open this fucking conversation with, why do African Americans like fried chicken so much, man? If you got a question, I don't care what it is, just ask it. At this point, at this point, I'm up to inviting Nazis for my own entertainment. Cause fuck it, why not? Rather, also, if you want to just like split, if you want to say it instead of typing it out, you can just raise your hand and I'll invite you up. Oh, you did. You did raise your hand. Raise my hand like a good Nazi student. Hey, Rade, how you doing? If you want to talk and speak a question, you feel free to go ahead.
Oh yeah. Hopefully that isn't like off base. So I've heard like African Americans being referred to as a separate racial identity than like
I can't
people.
I can't understand you.
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So I've heard like people referring to African Americans as being a separate racial identity than people from Africa. Is that right?
African Americans are in a separate racial identity than people just like from Africa.
Yeah,
Depends on who you ask. You have so there is something what's called the Pan African movement. You'll see this in a lot of places in America. You see this especially in the Caribbean because if you visit the Caribbean and you go up to Rastas, Rastas are
yeah,
Pan African. Bob Marley, for example, he said, I'm not black, I'm not white, but he would always say that I am African.
yeah. Um,
And his compatriots at the time said the same thing. His people like Peter Tosh, another Rastas, from his time and onward. People like Marcus Garvey back in the beginning of the 20th century said the same thing. So it's that's really just like sort of depends on who you ask. Because you
okay,
ask some people, and they might say, "Well, no, I'm African American, but I do identify with being African rather than just like a black person that lives in America." Uh,
okay,
Same thing, people all over the world.
okay. I don't know if I should ask my other question because it's kind of out there.
Well, if you want to,
Uh,
hold
fuck
on,
it.
I see Stone's about to ask a question.
Okay,
If you want to go if you want to hop down back to the audience, I'll answer. Looks like Stone's about to ask
sure.
something. All right, thanks to that, right? Do you have any thoughts, predictions, proposed revisions on the police system in the U.S. Relevant to the African American community? I am for police abolition. I don't support this like the immediate like dropping of them. 'Cause obviously, we need some of their duties to be fulfilled in society. But the most immediate thing that we can do is defund the police, put that money towards uh, other systems that would be more beneficial to have. Put it towards healthcare. We could put it towards mental care. Put it towards community investment in infrastructure, education, and that'd be my that simple few words way to put that. Um, as for how I think it might go, I mean, I think in the long term, unfortunately, my in terms of my predictions, uh, we might see on some levels some police departments get defunded. Uh, but overall, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, we've seen this sort of thing where it's like Democrats prior to the election were saying, "Oh yeah, we know we're gonna make sure that you have healthcare funding. We're gonna make sure it's not all taken up by that all your city's funds aren't just taken up by the police." And I mean, what does Biden do? Sending billions, he's sending millions, if not billions, of dollars to the states for police funding specifically. I mean, but fucking hell, like LA's city budget, half of it is just the police, not just emergency services. That includes stuff like ambulances and your fire departments and all that. It's just police. That just shouldn't be happening. So, I mean that's my thoughts on sort of police system in terms of its relevance to the African American community. So if you want to tackle the issues of crime in the African American community, you have to talk about why people are committing crime. The immediate and obvious answer is just outright poverty. 'Cause people don't just commit crime because they just want to. They often commit crime or resort to crime because they need to. Yeah, I'm reminded of a particular story. This is from years ago now. Uh, this guy, he had cancer and he could not afford the treatment, so he went into a convenience store with a gun and just held up the shop owner and told the shop owner to give him $1 and call the police. So that way he could be sent to prison and get his medical treatment. As a twist on the resort to crime thing, but I mean, it's a interesting story and uh, pretty I think a pretty good indictment of the American healthcare system. Who else we got in here? Let's see. We got Z, zero, 0 to 10th, and 0 to 11th. Are you two just the same account, or the two different people? Well, Z, I mean, I think you've been in here for a bit now. What do you got? If you got a question, feel free to pop one up. Or 0, of the 11th and 10th. Either one of you. Hmm. We got Z. All right. Why do you think so many people are against BLM? It's just a typical backlash to civil rights in general from the majority essentially. Uh, we sort of have this rose-tinted view of history when it comes to civil rights history and the civil rights movement era in particular. The way we tend to look at it is, oh, Dr. King, there was racism, and then Dr. King came along and he said he had a dream, and in that dream, racism was gone, and then he fixed it, and then everything's better now. And it's just no, that's not how that works. People don't realize that the civil rights movement was immensely unpopular. Dr. King was fucking despised. He was despised when he was alive. He's loved now. The reason he's loved now is because if you say you don't like Dr. King, you better have a good reason for it. Otherwise, you're probably just racist. Like if you can raise actual critiques of Dr. King, and I mean, like I can raise critiques of Dr. King. I do have critiques of Dr. King, but overall, I don't have any issues with Dr. King, any of his stances, any of the actions he took. I don't not any significant issues with him. But people are against BLM because they're just like it's just the typical majority backlash. When when an oppressed people start asking for their rights and their freedoms, you get the majority backlash saying, "Well, what about our rights?" You saw this happen. It happens time and time again, every single time. Yeah, you saw it in the civil rights movement. We saw it with feminism, and still see it with feminism. Women say our women say we are being violated, we're being discriminated against, and then men go, "Well, what about us?" We saw it with the push for gay marriage when gay people were asking for their right to be married, and straight people would say, "Well, they're asking they're asking for too much. They they're asking for all these different rights," and it's just like they just want to be equal to you. And they say, "Yeah, well, that's too much," because they want to continue to be able to discriminate against them. They want to be able to maintain that that power difference, that power structure that they have over those people, because it's an advantage to them. You take away someone's advantage, they're not going to like it. So, I mean, if you ask me what the case is in terms of people that hate BLM, that's it. Pretty simply, it's just majority backlash. I even dare to say white backlash, and white backlash is a pretty decently recorded phenomenon. Actually, yeah, to the point where there's actually a Wikipedia page on it. Z, if you wanna just look at that, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can see there in that article, it doesn't even just look at the United States. I mean, it doesn't look at the United States, in which there's a shit ton of examples from the end of the Second World War, from the end of the Civil War. I mean, up through the up through modern day events. But it also looks at South Africa. South Africa is a prime example of white backlash. If you want to ask my opinion about that. I think this is starting to slow down now. Well, let's see if we can squeeze a another like question or two out of you guys. If anyone here has a question, if anyone here has a listen and has a question, please feel free to ask something. I don't care how random it is, as long as it relates to the topic in some way. Again, we opened up with asking why do black people like fried chicken so much. So I mean, at this point, fuck it, just ask whatever. I wonder if you'll see that. Alright, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna invite people to speak. Oh, there we go. Boy got ideas. Okay, welcome to the discussion. We're just taking questions. It's starting to slow down a bit now, so I think we're gonna keep this one running for the next like 10 minutes, essentially. So it's gonna hit like 3 o'clock, and I'll cut it off there. So boy, if you have a question, I'm just gonna invite everyone up to speak. Um, feel free to ask, or if you have like a topic you want to ask my opinion on or something, no, go ahead. You can type it. You can type it in if you don't want to like speak it. Oh, there's Trop. There we go. A wise man can play the part of a clown, but a clown can't play the part of a wise man. Uh, oh, we just joined. I I saw someone come up into the thing for a second, and leave. Oh well. Trop, you got any questions you want to ask? Feel free to. Oi, that was you.
I hello, sorry. I clicked the button and then it booted me out for some reason.
Oh,
I
I
did
get.
I did see that other person join, but I don't know who that was.
The guy
So
named
I've not
Boy got ideas.
so I've got some questions more than anything, and
Yeah, yeah. That's go ahead.
yeah,
Shoot, shoot, shoot,
yeah, yeah.
shoot.
So with all the African history, I'm not 100% sure on this, and I hear it from very racist people, but
This will be good
wasn't
then.
it the Africans that started slavery at least? Because I don't know who I heard it off, but it was like
Yeah, this
South
is the
Africa.
the excuse is that well, America and Europe and all these places aren't really responsible for slavery for the
Yeah,
for the transatlantic slavery to have happened because it was other Africans that sold them into slavery. First of all, that's not true across the board. There are certainly instances of when that did happen, the where it was, but it wasn't just like, oh, they got these Africans and then they just gave them slaves that were other black people. I mean, it was like Europeans came to Africa, gave these particular tribes weapons and resources, and paid them in some other way, or just paid them in some other way, and said, "Bring us slaves," and they did.
okay.
But at the same time, they might have been they might have gotten enslaved at the end of it after they did all their work. The Europeans might have turned back around and said, "Okay, now you're going to be our slaves as well," to the people that they initially contacted. Or they just didn't do that at all and just fucking came in and just took people. There's not
Yeah,
like a totality of Africa that like that Europe contacted and said, okay, all these tribes that we're talking to right now, bring us slaves. It's like no, there were different conditions and situations throughout each each case of contact in Africa. It is just a dumb point just to try and sort of what's the word for it? Just kind of just like distract
Yeah,
from the fact that uh the European powers and the descendants of the European powers took advantage of free black labor. It's that's entirely it. We got who's this? Punish Venom Loon wants to come in and ask a question.
yeah. Okay,
Imagine,
I can step down.
yeah, I'll bring him up. Come on up, Venom.
Sorry, that took me a moment.
You're good.
Sorry, I just caught the end of that, but
Yeah, he was. In case you want to know what he was asking me about, he was asking
yeah.
about the point that people make sometimes. That well, sometime. He said he hears this mostly from racist people. He says
Hmm.
that well, the point that they oftentimes make is that it wasn't really the Europeans that came along and did slavery. It was African people that sold other African people into slavery, and it's just like, well, that's not entirely just like the entire. That's not the entire story there.
Well, I disagree on both points, if you don't mind me saying. I don't want to turn this into a discussion. Sorry, my tongue got tied there. I don't want to turn this into a debate, but
No, no.
my point being, it isn't the Europeans that came in. It was originally the Arabic people who sold them into slavery, and then the African kings decided that was a lucrative market and sold them into slavery. However, I don't want my question is pertaining to that. I don't know whether you said that already. My point is that in actuality, colonialism brought a lot of benefits to Africa, as we can see through Rhodesia, which was the most prosperous country within Africa at the time, and the end of apartheid in South Africa, which brought the country into a massive economic downturn. Um, my point being, to what point was colonialism that bad in actual fact? Because it seems as though colonialism actually worked, and the entire point of colonialism was eventually to end up with an equal side once the
Well,
uncivilized people became civilized.
yes, I mean, there's the futures, right? So first of all, uncivilized by whose standards is my first question. Uh,
Well, uncivilized by the standards of scientific progress, philosophical progress, civilization-based progress.
one of the
Quite
first
literally.
one of the first philosophers to ever rail against slavery was an African one, Jacob something. I can't remember what his name was. It
What
was a
that
couple.
would make sense is people were being
It was
enslaved.
prior. It was prior. No, this was prior to the Enlightenment period. This is prior to John Locke.
Well, no. My point is people were being enslaved prior to the Enlightenment period. They were
I
being enslaved for a very long
think
time.
this was prior. This is before contact with Europe. But anyway,
So
let
it
me.
was in prehistory then, because there is actual
No, this
evidence
is
that.
the 1500s.
Well, in the 1500s, Africans were enslaving Africans, so you can't really say that the first espoused person against European slavery was African.
They use against slavery as a concept.
Fair point.
But
Yeah,
anyway, let me move
I'll
on to
concede
the
that.
other
Sorry,
point.
that was
But let
my
me move
bad.
on to the other point. You said colonialism will bring the benefits. Will bring benefits to these so-called uncivilized people. Those
Well,
benefits were not evenly distributed. Is the issue. So you can say that colonialism brought a whole ton of benefits to South Africa and Rhodesia and all these other places in
Well,
in Africa.
the British string of Africa was quite literally the safest places in Africa during the entire period of colonialization. And then, when colonialization ends, there seemed to be a massive increase in crime, uproar, coup d'etat, and several other factors which made them the most inhospitable places on the planet.
So I will say this. Again, like those benefits were never evenly distributed. The black populations of colonialized Africa were always the poorest parts. Even in
Well,
today,
yes,
even
of
today in
course.
South
That's
Africa, even today in South Africa,
but that's the whole point.
the majority of the wealth in South Africa is owned by a white minority, and the white
Well,
population in South Africa is like 5%.
the whole point of colonialization was in order to develop the lands. Granted, there was a factor majoritively of white people who wanted to take advantage of the lands and quite literally rape them for all of their natural resources. I'm not going to deny that. But the actual factor of colonialization was in order to develop Africa as a nation. And I mean, let's face it, we look at India as an example. People say that the British raped India, but without the British, India would not be the country that it is today. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of people who would agree with that point. Because Britain brought railroads, sanitation, hygiene, a million and one different things. It's almost like the Judean People's Committee from Monty Python as to what Britain brought to the Indians. And once the Indians were ready, and once we saw that they were ready, they staged peaceful protests, they didn't do anything. We allowed them their own independence. But in Africa, we allowed them their own independence, and what happened? Every single country fell into almost instantaneous ruin, except from Rhodesia and South Africa.
Yeah, so I wanted to move on to that as well. So you might not be aware of this. A lot of the nations that declared independence, especially in French Africa, the French colonies in Africa, when they
And to be
declared
fair, they were the
independence.
French.
So when these countries declared independence, like such as a good example of this is Burkina Faso. By the way,
I really hate to ask, could we put a pin in this? I have a pastry in the oven and it's currently burning.
sorry, say it again.
I have a pastry in the oven and it's currently burning. Could I just be 2 seconds and just
Go ahead,
grab it out?
go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I do apologise for that. My bad.
No, yeah. Anyway, as I was saying, so let's see, from 1958, there's a nation that was called the Republic of Upper Volta, or in French, it was République de Haute Volta. In 1984, there was a revolution, led by a guy named was it Thomas? Yeah, Thomas Sankara.
Right.
He led the nation through some of its best years for 3 years straight, enacting various land reforms, public programs, outlawing things like genital mutilation, forced marriages, polygamy.
If I may ask, were those land reforms against white farmers?
No, actually, it was against. Well, it was some of it might have been against white farmers, but a lot of it was also against like tribal leaders. It was taking land and giving it to peasants in general. It wasn't just like it was taking it from the powerful, not just white people.
Objectively, he is a tribal leader as a powerful figure, so he was taking it from the powerful and giving it to people who had no idea in reality how to work the land
No,
directly.
these are people who were working the land.
Well, yes,
But
there were people in Zimbabwe, or should I say Rhodesia, there were people in South Africa, there were people in
But-
Mozambique who were
again,
all
that's
working
not
the land, but they didn't understand how to work the land, they just worked the land.
yeah. Again, it's not the point.
Well, no, it is
I
the
don't
point. If you
I don't have any because I don't have any stats on whether or not they really knew how to run things. I'm just telling you
Well,
what
no,
they
you
did.
can literally look at the economic downturn of Zimbabwe after all the white farmers were killed, and the fact that they're literally begging white farmers to come back in order to farm the land, and the fact that they worked the land, but they had absolutely no idea how to actually run the land itself. Yes, I could run the land. I could go and be a strawberry picker for a farmer literally 2 miles away, and I have done in the past. But I have absolutely no idea how to grow strawberries. I have absolutely no idea how to grow any of his crops because he's a
Okay,
farmer and I'm not. It's
I know,
the
but
same difference.
I need to finish my point because this is a bit off topic from where I was actually going.
Uh,
So,
sure.
so he enacted various programs that were objectively improving the country. The country did see various improvements throughout his time. Throughout his time when he enacted nationalizations and all these other public issues, public programs. He was killed in a he was killed in 1987. Thomas Sankara, in 1987 in a coup that was supported by France. This is not an unusual event for French Africa. We saw this throughout, from a period of from the 60s onward, from the 50s onward, where various
Which, if
French
I may,
African
is when decolonialization was in its full swing. So,
Yeah,
couldn't that...
French African nations were declaring independence and then suddenly having their leaders overthrown uh by militia groups or by inside people who were being paid by France to overthrow these nations that were going independent.
Hmm.
And this strong arming tactic actually forced a lot of French African nations to then invest their monetary systems into the it's the French African franc or something like that. It was a specific monetary fund that funds France's economy. I remember one time one of the economy ministers in France actually said, without these things, without these funding, without this funding from these African nations, France wouldn't have a viable economy. It is in short a modern day colonial tax that these nations are still paying today.
Well, I mean, no offense, but where would these nations be without colonialism? I mean, let's not forget, when we landed in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa had barely even invented the wheel when we arrived there.
Africa was much more advanced than we typically think of it. We've erased
I agree with you.
we've erased a lot of its history and culture, and
No, I
we've
agree
erased,
with you, but
we've
there's
erased the
not
records
much
of
culture
the
that shouldn't have been erased. Let's face it. I mean, female genital mutilation. You know, there are a lot of things in pre-colonial Africa that were quite terrible, and I don't mean by modern standards.
I have no idea if genital female mutilation existed in pre-colonial Africa or not. I don't know if that was
pretty
introduced.
much everywhere.
Because for all I know, that might have been introduced by the tide of Islam being introduced into Africa, or that might have been introduced by Christians into Africa, because Christians also practiced it at some point as well.
Yes, much later than the scramble for Africa. Sorry, much earlier. My bad. I'm sorry, I get those two mixed up. It's my bad. I'm quite tired. I probably shouldn't really be debating this, but Christians practiced that much earlier than the scramble for Africa. In actual fact, a lot of slavery was stopped by Europeans. A lot of female genital mutilation was stopped by Europeans. A lot of the tribal sort of culture was stopped by Europeans. Actually, Africa was almost entirely modernized into the nation states that they kind of are today, even though they're not really, by Europeans. We gave them the foundations, and then when they requested independence, let's face it, most of it was owned by Britain. Britain said, there's your independence, and what have they done with it? They have turned Africa into a literal cesspit that people mostly think of as mud huts and anarchy.
Again, I did just point out the fact that that a lot of these nations were overthrown by that after they went independent, were overthrown by their previous European powers that were ruling over them. Like
So
I gave
they
the
had a
example.
military.
I gave the example of
Yeah,
French Africa
I know
to point
the
out
fact that you gave the examples. I saw the examples. I just mean
that was supposed to be
they had a
that was supposed to be
military.
analogous of
Well, no, they
all
had a
of
military.
colonial
They had
Africa.
security forces. They had a great many different things, and I'm not talking about the French because the French had a very many underhanded tactics, as did the Belgians, specifically in the use of mercenary armies, which I don't agree with. But specifically in relation to British African countries who were given independence, Rhodesia was literally fought against, even though it was the most successful country in Africa, which gave relatively free equality to every race, relatively speaking. I mean, I'm not saying that they were absolutely equal in any stretch of the imagination, because they weren't, but it was the best country in Africa at the time. It was better than South Africa, it was better than Mozambique, it was better than Morocco. It was the best country in Africa. It was the most prosperous. It had the smallest wealth gap between rich and poor. It had the best equal rights of any African nation, and yet it was completely destroyed. Specifically, Mugabe, a genocidal dictator, into power.
Oh my god! Oh yeah, wait, is he the one who ran Zimbabwe? Robert Mugabe.
Yeah, Robert Mugabe overthrew Robert Mugabe overthrew Rhodesia, and he created Zimbabwe, and then he basically forced kids to work in the diamond mines, and pretty much he ruined everything.
I don't support Mugabe.
No, I'm not saying you do. I'm saying that's the case in quite literally most African countries where they were just left to their own devices. It's the same story all over. They aspires for communism. Dictator gets elected. A dictator does horrible things, and then it was all blamed on the Europeans for European power, when in actual fact they were given complete independence, they could rule themselves, and then what happened? Everything fell apart, because the Europeans weren't there to run it for them. And no, I'm not saying that in a racist manner, I'm saying, in actual fact, the Europeans were holding everything together, and then they asked for your independence. Yep, you get independence, here you go, here's how you run everything.
Can you really say that the Europeans were holding everything together if they're holding?
Yes, there are literally tens of examples of countries. Well, yes, because there are tens of examples. Quite literally, South Africa is one of them. Rhodesia is one of them. Mogadishu is one of them. Somalia itself is one of them. Almost every country in Africa is an example. The only real, survivors
South Africa is a relatively for one of the nations. For one thing, it suffered the least post independent meddling compared to.
Have you ever spoken to a South African, both black and white, as I have several people, who have discussed the end of apartheid?
Yeah, man, I've met a few white South Africans.
Have you ever met a black South African who would say that the end of apartheid was the worst thing to happen to South Africa?
No.
Because every single South African that I've ever met, and I espouse you, I have met a lot of them. Black, white, doesn't matter. Every single South African that I have met says the end of apartheid was the worst thing to ever happen to South Africa.
Yeah, I've never heard.
I have. A lot. Because I heard and saw what it's like before. It was a true gem of the Horn of Africa. Before. And after, it is a godforsaken fucking hellhole. And if you ever go there, may God bless your soul, because you will need it. please make no espouse of my judgment. I'm not saying that blacks can't be trusted. That is in no way my argument. I am saying that they were not ready for independence. In absolutely no way. They weren't taught how to run a civil service. They were not taught how to run a government effectively because it was all run by the whites.
Were they ever going to be taught those things?
Theoretically, yes. Yes, they were, when they were actually ready for them. But they demanded independence and it was far too expensive to keep them, so they were given them. They were given them straight away. Because we were the higher power in that. And you have to understand that you have to look out for number one. And I don't care who you are, if you disagree with that fact, then you're a liar. Same for any leader of any nation. It's unfortunate, it's terrible, and it probably shouldn't have happened. But it was necessary.
Yeah, I have my doubts about that. The any of the apartheid governments in Africa would have given any sort of significant power to Africans willingly without the massive amounts of work
Well,
and
most certainly,
demonstrations that was
Rhodesia
being.
did. Rhodesia did. Rhodesia gave power to the black man. As I said, in Rhodesia, it was almost certainly not quite equal. I will grant you that. But it was as equal as you can be. You have to maintain a balance of power with people who actually understand how the government runs. But there were people who were being taught, genuinely, how to run a government, how to run a civil service, how to run such and such and such. It was actually becoming a genuinely, quite frankly, an exceptional state. And I'm not trying to espouse, Rhodesia was the best country in Africa. Technically, yes, I am, because that is fundamentally true if we look at both economic output and equality measures. I'm not saying it's the best country in Africa ever. I'm saying it's the best country in Africa at the time that was giving, equal rights, equal work, similar things. They were teaching them what to do, they were teaching them how to run things, and then it got overthrown by communists. Specifically due to independence and a lack of intervention by the international community.
So I see. I've found what you're talking about here. The dictum of Cecil Rhodes. I'm assuming is what you mean. His sort of thing of equal rights for all civilized men in Rhodesia.
Quite right. Yeah.
So there was no overt racial component to the franchise. Yeah, they had that in America as well, and just like it says here, the requirement excluded a majority of native black people from the electorate regardless.
Yes. When was it made?
Turn of the century, looks like.
Exactly. I'm not talking about turn of the century. I'm talking about the 60s and 70s. I'm talking about a nation state that was genuinely prosperous, that genuinely had decent ideals, that genuinely allowed black and white people to intermix, that genuinely allowed for freedom of people. And it got overthrown by communists because the international community decided that it was racist, specifically due to that accord. In spite of the fact that Rhodesia had actually done more for racial equality within Africa than any other nation at that point.
In Rhodesia, how many people in their legislative assembly were black?
I don't know, quite frankly. I'll be honest with you, I don't know the exact number of people who were black within their government. However, I do know.
What was the amount that white people made versus the amount that black people made on average?
Almost completely irrelevant.
How is that irrelevant?
You teach a man to fish, he eats for the rest of his life. You give a man a fish, he eats for a day.
Mhm.
Same difference. The white farmers genuinely taught, and I can tell you this for a fact, because I have spoken to them. They taught the blacks how to farm. They taught them the difference of soil pH levels. They taught them which crops grew in which season. They taught them how to actually farm properly. And there were black farms within Rhodesia. There were black people within the 1%.
This doesn't
And
tell me. I mean, you're saying that. I mean, you said just now there are black people in the 1%, and that there was an equivalent sort of the equivalence in economics between black people and white people in Rhodesia. But then I ask you, how did that economic power transfer in terms of their wealth? And you're giving me this spiel.
well, I'm telling you, they had their own farms, which were
Okay.
the most powerful things within Rhodesia. And you
Okay,
can come at me with
so
all of this.
what I'm asking you is how did that translate into actual economic power? Because economic power translates into political power, and political power can translate into economic power as well. And that
Not
also
necessarily.
and these things all contract into social power, and yeah, they do, quite frankly. I don't know much about Africa because Africa is not the country I've studied. I've studied African American history. I can raise you the example of Wilmington, North Carolina, in the 1890s, was post Reconstruction. So this isn't the time when massive programs were being carried out by the federal government in favor of African Americans anymore. I can tell you that in Wilmington, North Carolina, black people were being elected into office. Black people uh, held large amounts of business ownership, like barbers,
Um,
tanners,
if
blacksmiths.
if
They
I,
held
I
economic
don't mean to
power, they
interrupt.
had social power, they had political
It's
power.
nothing to do with your argument. I just have to go now to the bins now. So
Well, I mean, there's 20 minutes over, so I mean, I think we're gonna end it here anyway.
yeah, it's probably best. We have had quite a good discussion. It was actually quite fun. So
Yeah,
thank you for that.
no problem.
Anyway, I'm just gonna head out because I've got stuff to do. But it was great talking to you.
No problem.
All right, goodbye.
Bye. All right, guys. For those of you that came in and started listening here, thanks for popping in and